Hey, this is Don McGrath, and welcome to the Climbing Lifer podcast. Climbing Lifer podcast, I really created this for those climbers who have done a lot of trips around the sun, want to do a lot more trips around the sun, and also want to have it filled with climbing and adventure. And today I am just so super excited to have an absolute big wall legend on today. In fact, when I was kind of intimidated when I started looking at his resume. I was looking at it online. I'm like, oh my goodness. This could probably be a show that goes 4 hours long. And so really welcome to the show, legend, big wall climber and great fun guy, John Middendorf. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, John.
Well, thank you, Don. I appreciate it. Yeah, looking forward to it.
And we got a couple of firsts here on this podcast. First podcast, first international podcast of doing from Tasmania, which is where John is today. And I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So you can see it's 8 in the morning there, John?
8 in the morning. Yep. It's a bright, nice day, summertime here in Tasmania. And looks like we're going to get another beautiful summer Tasmanian day.
All right. Excellent. We're here in the kind of dead of winter in Colorado. So John, I'd love to know, like, I always like to start kind of at the beginning. How did you get started climbing?
Well, actually, when I was 14 years old, a cousin of mine had gone to this mountaineering school in Telluride called the Telluride Mountaineering School. It was run by a fellow, Dave Farney. And my folks thought it might be good for me because I was starting to get a little listless in the summers, long American summer breaks from school. And so they sent me off to this mountaineering school. I hadn't really been outdoors much at the time. And it's a month program. And the first day you wake up, you do calisthenics at before the light comes out. And then you run up to this lake at about 9,000 feet above sea level and jump into this freezing cold lake. And that was the first day of experience of this mountaineering school. And, you're as 14-year-old boy, you're just like, oh my gosh. And some of the kids were pretty resistant to it. But I realized wow, we're really going to get pushed here. But anyway, it was a month-long program. And basically, it was mostly like hiking and backpacking in the San Juan Mountains. But there was a week program of climbing on the Silverton Durango route. And it was just beautiful. Henry Barber was one of the instructors, and there's all sorts of amazing climbers who would work there in the summer as guides, and it just exposed me to rock climbing. And it was one of those things where I actually just found that I took it up really easily. I found wow, this is good moving around, maybe because I'm tall and lanky. But, I just found that it was something that I was suddenly good at because I'd always been really terrible at all the team sports that you go through in American high schools and stuff. And I was rowing actually as a teenager, rowing single sculls, which I also enjoyed. But the climbing was just all of a sudden it was oh, this is what I love to do. And ever since then, it's just been passion.
So that experience could have pushed you away from the mountains forever, right? Or pulled you in forever. And it sounds like it pulled you in.
Yeah, exactly. I think some of the kids were thinking it was a military camp. Dave Farney was actually, he's one of these fellows who believes that toughness, tough experiences makes you stronger. One of the aspects of the program, for example, is this 3-day solo that you do, where they take you out in the middle of nowhere blindfolded, and you have to spend the first night tied to a tree with no tent or sleeping bag in pretty much near freezing conditions, and then the next day they come in and they give you a little bit of food and some matches to build a fire. And so you spend 3 days out in the solo out in the mountains. So in a way it's like a hazing program for the mountains. But
sounds like hazing to me. Yeah. Today we would call that hazing, right?
Yeah, it was a great start because really, the philosophy of being out in the mountains, where you're in raw Mother Nature and things are tough, was my first experience in climbing. So, as opposed to, just being a purely gymnastic aspect. So that kind of experience has always been part of my, I guess, climbing philosophy, is go out there and get into raw nature.
So I'm sure you had, because of the time of when you were climbing and where you climbed, I'm sure you had a lot of mentors. Is there any mentors that stand out in your mind?
Well, as I mentioned, Henry Barber was one of the instructors at this program. And so just seeing how graceful and how fluid he was on very difficult climbs was inspiring. But really, I think what happened after that is I went back to high school and I met this friend of mine, John Ely, who was really interested in climbing. And we joined, there was no climbing clubs or climbing gyms, of course, back in those days. There was a little crag called Carter Rock near where we lived in the Washington, D.C. area. And we both joined the caving club just to get experience with ropes and things. But really, climbing was what we wanted to do. And he was probably the motivating force for those first few years of my climbing. You know, he talked about Yosemite, and we managed to borrow a car and drive out there at age 17 and did our first big walls together, actually, Half Dome. And what we started in a 2-week trip. We did the East Buttress of El Cap, Washington Column, and Half Dome. And after that, you know, I was just hooked on the big stuff.
Wow, that's quite a first trip to Yosemite.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then we, you know, of course, went back to high school and then we started climbing a lot at Carter Rock, which was you know, more just short little technical climbing, but at the same time, you know, it was all about just training for these big things that we wanted to do. Like that was what we dreamed about.
So Carter Rock, I've never been there, but I've heard a lot about it. It's relatively small. So that's where you trained for the big walls, was on Carter Rock?
Well, I trained for the free climbing, but it's only about, you know, 20 meters high, and it's all these little thin face climbs. And John Stannard was there. I remember seeing him. He never really spoke to us or anything, but he would show up and we just watched him solo these amazing climbs. And you know, it was more just a place to learn the skill, really, of you know, moving on rock. We also would lead these things, and thinking back on these first leads I would do, I mean, basically there'd be like 1 or 2 pieces of decent pro for 20 meters. You know, you usually did them on routes that you'd already top rope before, because mostly it's a top rope area. But no, it's just more like the ground training for getting good on moving on rock, really.
So what was it like that first time on a big wall, really the first time ever on a big wall, being there on the wall in Yosemite? Any story that would demonstrate what that was like?
Well, yeah, as I say, we were 17 years old. We drove out to Yosemite, did a couple early, you know, like a couple training walls, like east face El Cap, just along free route, and then the south face of the column. And then we geared up for Half Dome. And it was quite intimidating because there really weren't a lot of, like, you know, teenagers really climbing big walls back then. And so we hike up to the base with all our gear, which was just basically a canvas duffel bag and, you know, like antifreeze water bottles. And we get to the base, and there's 2 other parties ahead of us. And we're like, oh no, you know, we didn't really bring food for an extra day, and it looks like we're gonna have to wait until these parties get out. Well, one of the parties was up on the first pitch, and all of a sudden he takes this huge whipper and breaks his leg, and so he's coming down. Big rescue comes in, a helicopter comes in, takes him off. We help with the rescue. The other party that was ahead of us, they decided you know, they were kind of freaked out.
They were done, right? They're done.
So all of a sudden we had the route to ourselves, you know, nobody ahead of us. So it's really quite intimidating starting up this 2,000-foot rock face with pretty much, like, you know, only a week of experience of doing multi-pitch routes. But, you know, we just, we mostly free climbed it, you know, all the stuff that 5.9 are easier. And then we learned how to aid climb really on the thing too. But we, you know, we were inspired by Royal Robbins's basic and advanced rock craft and all the Sheridan drawings in there, and just felt like we were monkeys getting up there, and we made it up.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I have gone back to the first climbs that I ever did in the gunks. And I think to myself, what was I ever doing on these things? You know, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, when we think about all the equipment we had, it was all just tied up slings for aiders, and the haul bag kind of blew out, like almost, you know, we were losing stuff falling out of the bottom. And, you know, we're just lucky we didn't get hit by any major storms or anything, because that would have been pretty bad. But that's how you are when you're learning back in those days. You didn't really have a lot of there wasn't a lot of information on how to do it or anything like that. So it's more just an adventure.
Yeah. So if humble beginnings, then you went on to just do so much. And I tell you, I was reading the resume, and my goodness, you've climbed all over the world, incredible stuff, tons of first ascents, just amazing stuff. And what was that time like in your life when you were on that role?
Well, yeah, I guess I was pretty focused on becoming an engineer, which I did. I mean, I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree. And after that, I was really feeling like I had to get in the workforce. But I ended up just touring through Yosemite on this motorcycle I had gotten, and met Warner Braun. And he meant, I'd been to Yosemite 3 or 4 times before, and done a few climbs, after that Half Dome, nose and things like that. But I wasn't really thinking I was going to become a lifer climber. I was thinking I was going to be more like, entering the workforce and getting to be an engineer somewhere. But anyway, I met Warner in Yosemite on this last little trip I was going to take through there, and just all I had at the time was shoes. I had shoes and chalk bag and a 2-inch Swami, because I had sold all my gear after I graduated from university. And as I said, I was planning to get back into the workforce. But then Warner's like, he says, "Hey man, you want to go climbing?" And we ended up going to Cookie Cliff and doing some 511s there. And I was just like, "Oh, this is so good here." And he said, "There's an opening on the rescue team. You might want to go over and talk to John Dill over in the rescue cache and see if you want to get on." And I was floored, because I never really felt like, the rescue team in Yosemite was always this mythical kind of group of climbers who were really all great big wall climbers. And so I went over and ended up getting on the rescue team in Yosemite in 1984 in January, winter, and ended up living there for the next 3 years in a tent. And basically, just started climbing a lot. Basically every day it was about climbing, and those 3 years is when I basically became a big wall climber, I guess you could say. Just fascinated with all the walls. Did El Cap 20 or 30 times, and all the big formations in Yosemite. It was a dream time, really, being on the rescue team.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to take a moment, take a sponsor break, and thank our sponsor, Sharp End Publishing. They are a publishing company by climbers, for climbers. They have incredible guidebooks. They've got incredible instruction books, adventure books, including Vertical Mind, my and Jeff Ellison's book about mental training for rock climbing. And so if you have a trip planned, go to sharpendbooks.com and see the books that they have, because they have the best guidebooks, the highest quality guidebooks that you'll ever find. Go there and see if they have a guidebook that can help you. If you don't have a trip planned, well, go to Sharp End Books anyways and see if you get inspired to plan a trip based upon what books are there. And hey, if you happen to see Vertical Mind and you feel like your mental game might be holding you back from achieving what you really want to get out of your climbing, that's what the book's all about. It's all about the science of the mind, and then drills to help you overcome the things that hold us back as climbers. All right, so John, so you had a big career shift. So, and you went to some really pretty great schools, right?
Well, yeah, I actually started out at Dartmouth College because, and really I chose Dartmouth, got in on an early admission because it was considered the outdoor school. There's a lot, like the first week you go to Dartmouth, they actually have this 1 week backpack that you do. And so I went there for my first 2 years of university. And then, but I was studying engineering and really loved engineering. And I kind of ran out of engineering courses there. That their engineering program was good, but it wasn't like, it didn't have a lot of extensive courses. And then then I thought about switching, and I transferred out to Stanford, which not only had like huge amount of engineering courses, a lot that I was interested in, but also, of course, was close to Yosemite. And so I went out there and transferred out there and started my engineering program there. But also did a lot of side trips to Yosemite. There's a few times when I was supposed to be studying for exams, but I was pushing the pushing the deadlines to do some long routes in Yosemite as well. Those were good years. Like, just basically climbing for me was more just it wasn't a passion and lifetime pursuit at that time, I guess you could say. It wasn't until I spent those 3 years in Yosemite as on the rescue team that I realized, like, oh, this is what I want to actually I just was in love with big walls, really, and just wanted to see how far I could push it on big walls. Really, climbing for me always was more of it's almost like more of the spiritual experience of climbing, because when you put yourself out there and you're doing these long routes, you get into these moments where all of a sudden you're so exhausted from the day before, from the day of climbing, and you're setting up your hammock or portaledge or whatever, and you just get these kind of magic moments. So that became a bit of a addiction, I guess you could say, like just experiencing that feeling of pushing yourself to as far as you can push yourself in terms of physical and mental, really, because difficult aid climbing can be quite mentally taxing as well. And then actually just getting that experience of being up there and really quite away from the rest of the normal society, I guess you could say, just really feeling like that separate piece up there.
Yeah, anybody who's ever spent the night on a wall, whether on a portaledge or on a ledge, can understand what that's like. When you were talking about that, what came to mind for me was I'd done Astroman back in the 90s, and we slept on that ledge, like I think it's just below the changing corners pitch. And I remember being so exhausted and looking over and seeing the headlamps on Half Dome. And that for me was one of those magic moments, like, holy man, look where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you get to the top and you get down, and, your first thing is like, oh, I'm glad, kind of glad it's over. But a day or two later, you're like, I want to go back up there, because you're just remembering that experience and you want to experience it again.
So you ended up you put your engineering background to use. And I saw a reference that you, and I don't know how true this is, so you tell me if this is true, that you had a bad experience with one of the portaledges that you were using. And I don't know, this thing I read said you almost died or something. I don't know, but you actually, that I imagine inspired you to put your engineering to design better ones.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, basically when I started big wall climbing, we were in forced hammocks, they're kind of a bit of torture chamber devices. You got in them and you just felt squished. Your shoulders would just get compressed, and next morning it would take about a half hour before you could even like lift your arms over your head. And also in a storm, hammocks would just become, they were nightmares. All the water running down the wall would just run right into your hammock. And so back then, I mean, if you got caught in a storm on El Cap or a big wall, you basically were retreating the next day. The hammocks were purely for good weather. It was hard to continue after a storm because you would just get so wet. And then, of course, Gramici came out with his cliff dwelling. And, these were a breakthrough. People had been using things like these submarine cots that weighed about 50 or 60 pounds as portaledges. And they were good for places like, El Cap, where there's a 20-minute approach. But you couldn't really, people weren't really hauling them up to the base of Half Dome or anything. And so when Gramici came out with his lightweight portaledge, his first really commercial portaledge ever, it was a big breakthrough. And for the first time, people could start taking these platforms up Half Dome and more remote big walls that require longer approach. The issue with them was that they worked great if it was on a flat wall and fairly nice, fairly decent weather. I mean, they would definitely protect you from rain. But what we found is on south face of Half Dome, we were up there and we got hit by one of Yosemite's worst storms. And of course, the south face of Half Dome is not vertical. So this is my girl, Remy. She's just here. And and so the first day we got caught in this big storm, and it was basically like 1 foot waterfalls pouring down the face. And just even with the Portaledge, you know, we're just getting drenched through osmosis through the fly. It was lightweight ripstop rain fly. And then it froze that night. And then we started getting these incredibly strong winds, probably, you know, 60, 70, 80 mile an hour winds that were ripping through the little Yosemite Valley there. It's like a Venturi effect. And so one of the Portaledges, just the fly just shredded. It just like tore up into pieces. And another Portaledge just collapsed under the weight of the snow and ice that was piling up on the ledge. And it was because the frames weren't really designed. I mean, they were designed for one person, but not one person and 100 pounds of snow. And so we basically hobbled together 2 Portaledges. And so Mike Corbett and Steve Bosky were my partners on that south face route. They were huddled in one Portaledge. I was in another. We were just getting buried by snow. You know, we all, you just have to basically maintain the integrity of the ledge, like constant maintenance to make sure it didn't collapse and shred. We were lucky to get rescued by the Lemoore Navy helicopter that came in a break in that storm, because if we had had to spend another night up there, another storm did come in after the break, we would surely have perished. So yeah, after that experience, I basically was humbled, you know, and was terrified of going up on another wall for many years. But I also realized like a better Portaledge could be designed, really, you know. And so I moved to Flagstaff, Arizona. I set up a new company called A5 Adventures. My first products were things like a hammer, big wall hammer. That no big wall gear was really being made in the 80s, because big wall climbing was out of fashion, and it was all about clean climbing and hard tree climbing. So I started making big wall gear specific that had been made for 10 or 15, 20 years, like big wall hammer, for example. And also started tinkering on Portaledge designs. And so that started about 1987 or 8. And I would say like over the next 10-year period from 88 to 98, we basically perfected this truly storm-proof Portaledge, really the world's first Portaledge that really could withstand the kind of conditions that were, you would experience on a big wall. And so what that opened up was a lot of, basically a lot of the big walls that were in places like Patagonia and Himalaya and the Karakoram. A lot of the great big walls that had been done before up to that point were done in what you call siege style, where you take a lot of fixed ropes, like all the big wall routes in Patagonia, all the amazing British routes that were being done on these massive 4,000 foot walls in Patagonia were done with either they were like kind of more free climbing routes, or if it was a true big wall, this is Remy, they were done like what you call siege style. People would bring a lot of fixed ropes, and because there wasn't any technology to be able to spend the night up there. Willens had made this heavy box that had been used, but weighed like 50, 60 pounds.
Whoa.
And so all of a sudden, now that we pretty much developed this lightweight Portaledge that would withstand any conditions on a wall, essentially. It kind of opened up a huge, like in the 90s, there was a huge boom in these remote big wall standards, because now people are going to Patagonia and Baffin Island and Karakoram and Himalaya and doing these huge 4,000 foot walls, alpine style, big wall alpine style, they call it, where they're basically leaving the ground. They're not using a lot of fixed ropes, because basically you could survive any storm that you were gonna experience, even these incredibly severe Himalayan storms. So
that really changed the game.
It changed the game. Yeah, I mean, there's an amazing number of like really talented climbers, like Brad Jarrett and Jared Ogden and Steve Quinlan and Mug Stump and all these climbers, you know, were coming to see me in my shop and collaborating with the design and helping me, Walt Shipley, figuring out like better ways to make this lightweight kit, bivy kit. So yeah, it was a really fun collaborative process in creating.
Dad, look at this.
That's amazing, man. Remy's balancing on the ball right now.
All right.
And so yeah, it was a great 10-year period of really perfecting the world's first truly storm-proof portaledge for big wall climbing. That was, so we made 3 different models. We made a 1-person ledge. We really made the first 2, commercial 2-person ledges. This was Mug Stump idea because he was climbing a lot in Alaska and realized like 2 people in 1 portaledge is a better system. Not only do you save weight, but you're also cooking together and you have the shared warmth of living together. And so we kind of perfected that alpine double, we call it now, portaledge, which was, only, we made versions that weighed about 10 or 11 pounds with the rainfly that were suitable for any sort of expedition you'd ever want to do.
Wow, that's really fantastic. Just so you got to put it's almost like you got to combine your 2 passions, climbing and engineering, bring them together in such a unique way.
There was a lot of engineering involved with it, just in terms of designing the frame really, and the way. What we discovered is that you need rigid corners. That was the problem with the Gamici ledges, is that they had just a pin joint for the corners, and so the ledge would basically parallelogram and fail in a severe loading situation. And so what one of the things we did was figure out like rigid corners, heavier fly, easier ways to set it up with bed tensioners, dividers for the 2-person ledge. We just kept coming up with like different ways to improve it over those 10 years. And basically a lot of engineering involved with just the patterning, even like patterning a 3-dimensional object out of 2-dimensional fabric. There's a lot of engineering in that too, a lot of trigonometry. I teach high school now, so I'm always talking to my high school students about the usefulness, because the first question they always ask is, when are we ever going to use this stuff? And so I can give them a couple real world examples.
Well, the portaledge, who knows? You might go on to be one of the people who design the next big whatever thing in your own passion. And speaking of engineering, I want to take another quick break. So I actually had someone reach out to me who has a really, really cool product. And I use Belay Glasses. I've used them for years. I've used various models. And John and I were talking about how as you get older and you start spending, decades staring up, belaying your partners, that that your neck becomes kind of an issue. And so I got these really cool Belay glasses from a company called Pitch 6. They're called iSend. And having worn a lot of other Belay glasses, what makes these different is that there's a way to adjust the angle of the view. So right on the glasses, there's a way so that you don't have to, if the other glasses tend to look straight up. And so you've got to crane your head or hold your head or put the glasses down your nose in certain ways to try to adjust them based upon the steepness of the wall and where you're standing and where you can stand, or if you're on a multi-pitch route on a belay ledge. So these are really cool. And I tried them out in the gym. My wife tried them out. We really, really loved them. We asked some other people to try them out. They thought they were really, really cool. So, and also I think they look a little more sturdy than, I won't say the names of the other ones, but I've actually had cases where in really hot weather, or if I leave these in my car, the little prism, the glue comes undone and they pop out, and it's kind of bad. So these look more sturdy. I guess we'll see when it gets really, really hot, but this is a Kickstarter program. You can find them on, if you just Google iSend, or if you Google Pitch 6, you can go find the Kickstarter program, and you can get these really inexpensively right now because it's a Kickstarter program, I think for $79 or something like that. So really, really cool stuff. Just a big shout out. And again, back to engineering, so someone someone was able to combine their engineering skills with solving a problem that they saw, just much like you were able to do with the Portaledges, John.
Yeah, I need a pair of those. I was just out at the Sport Crag here in Tasmania with my boy, and he's starting to climb pretty hard. He's starting to lead like 510s, and so there's a great sport climbing crag, and I never thought I'd get him started on leading with sport climbing, but it's great. It's a great, and there's amazing crag out here called Sand River. But I noticed like belaying him, definitely my neck can get quite strained, and I want to keep a good eye on him, so I need to get a pair of those.
Yeah, when you're looking up for 40 minutes or something like that, when someone's working a route, when you get to our vintage, you want to protect all the joints as much as you can. You realize that I always like to say our warranty's up. We're on duct tape and baling wire. Period. So now you live in Tasmania and you teach math. Tell us a little bit more, kind of what how that transpired.
Well, around 2000, I had the business A5 Adventures, and I sold that to North Face. I worked for them for a couple years, great years. I had my own budget, and I had a whole development shop, and we developed a whole slew of new products. Actually, it was great, really having the resources of this big company. But around 1998 or so, they decided, basically they went through a little bit of company reorganization. They had to cut back, and my division got eliminated essentially. And so I was a little bit bummed because, I'd sold the company just to get access to greater resources, which I did, as I say, for 2 years, and came out with like a 1998, 1999 A5 product line within the company. But then, how big companies are, they have to make just cost-cutting decisions sometimes. And of course, we were making cutting-edge gear, but, low margin and not high volume. So those kind of things are the first things the accountants cut, I guess. Yeah. So I was sort of out, and also I had this non-compete, which kind of bummer because I really wanted to continue designing gear. But anyway, so after that I was like, well, okay, I can't design climbing gear right now. I'm going to work on something else that interests me, which is tension fabric structures. But I realized that I needed more skill because I had graduated in 1984 before computers were really the mainstream way to engineer. And so I went to the University of New South Wales in Australia to basically get a master's of engineering and learn all the new techniques like finite element analysis and CAD, 3D CAD and things like that. So I was studying there and realized like Australia would be a great opportunity. It's quite sensible over here, I gotta say. And so I applied for my permanent residency. I got accepted as a skilled migrant to Australia, and basically was thinking that I would move here for my next career in tension fabric structures. Well, I went back. I was also river guiding in the Grand Canyon at the time, and I went back for a summer season of Grand Canyon river guiding. Met my wife Jenny, who is also a river guide down there, and we got married. And so the plans to move to Australia got put on hold because at first she really wasn't excited about moving halfway around the world. We have a lot of family in the U.S. And so it took a few years. When you get your permanent residency here, you have 5 years to use it or lose it. And so after 4.5 years, I was like, Jenny, I still have this kind of coupon to move to Australia, permanent residency. Would you be willing to move there for a year just to try it out? And part of the deal was that for us to move here, we had a boy, Rowan, who was 1 year old at the time. Part of the deal was I said, we can move wherever you like. And so we came around and we toured Australia for a few months, and she chose Tasmania. And I was thinking I'd move more to Melbourne where I could set up this fabric business and things like that. But yeah, she chose Tasmania, and in retrospect, what a beautiful choice, really. Tasmania it's really quite an amazing place to live, and especially to bring up kids, because there's so much opportunity here. There's so much wildness in Tasmania.
I'm going to go pick a berry.
All right. And
It's kind of a
you
bird.
can probably hear all the birds. I mean, we live in a place
Yeah, we can
where,
hear the wildlife. There's, it seems like you're
Yes.
in the middle of a zoo. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, we see all sorts of like critters roaming around. The birds' life is amazing. And we're only 20 minutes outside of capital city of Hobart.
Not really.
So yeah, it's just a wonderful place to be, really. And as the kids are getting older, you know, really, I mean, frankly, I haven't really been climbing too much in the last 20 years, since around 2000. But the last few years, my boy and this is Remy here sitting with me, and I've been getting back into climbing because it's such a wonderful way to introduce them to this exciting and beautiful sport of climbing. And so slowly but surely, you know, I've been getting into doing moderate routes. And Remy and I, she wanted me to tell you that we climbed Tiptoe Ridge together, which is about a 400 or 500 foot climb in Arapalis. And that was an amazing experience. And she's getting quite good. And Rowan, you know, as I mentioned, he's starting to climb 510. And so it's really getting me back into climbing, where I need to focus on keeping those skills strong. I would say I never really got out of shape really badly, but definitely get back into 510 or 511 climbing. I need to work it. And so I don't know, well, you can see we have a little bit of a gym here if you're on video. I've got a trapeze in our backyard and a pretty big jungle gym. So we also have a climbing wall that I built for the kids. So really,
there was some other climbers.
Yeah,
too.
Andy Kylars helped us build that, and so yeah, basically it's been really fun.
And
like,
gear.
kind of getting back into climbing where
And gear.
and gear too. Yes, yeah.
And I think
So-
a lot of people who are listening to this or watching this can relate to that, because life happens, right? We take diversions, things come in and out of our life. Climbing might take a back seat for a while, but you know, if it's in your blood, you really want to do it. But it's one thing we were talking about the other day is, you know, many people might see the guidebooks for Australia and be like intimidated that there's these enormous, difficult climbs, which seem to be the ones that are featured. And actually, I love seeing them when I see them in the mags. But now it sounds like there's some more moderate crags being developed, which is great for us.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's sort of come full circle now. Like there's, you know, first when sport climbing came in, it was mostly hard routes that were getting put up, and now I think when people are establishing a crag, they're recognizing that there's people who are learning, and even, you know, the best climbers are taking some time to put up some, you know, 5.8s and 5.9s to you know, keep things interesting.
Because it does change, right? So what does climbing mean to you now?
Well, climbing to me, it's always been meant the same. It's a way to experience, you know, the outdoors, really, but also to push your own limits and to do things that you know that are intimidating, but you know you overcome the intimidation, and that's an exciting feeling, to be able to do things that maybe your instincts are saying, well, you know, you're scared here, like let's not continue, but you push through that, and so it's really, you know, like life, you want to be able to you don't want to really just be sitting around, you want to be productive and doing things. And so climbing is a way to do that physically, I guess you could say, and mentally. If you're not watching, then this is Remy, who's doing a little bit of a dance around here.
I'm not.
So do you ever see yourself?
On your leg.
So I would say, yeah, it's the personal challenge, really. It's a way to check in with yourself, to see where you are at, and it's fun. You know, it's fun after you do something hard that's hard and you didn't think you could do. You get the, you know, dopamine rush, and that's great too. But I think also there's a bit of a spiritual component for me. It's the experience of oh, please don't touch that, because otherwise you'll cut them off.
No,
So yeah, I mean, I would say it's that spiritual component as well as the physical component, as well as challenging yourself. All those things are what climbing is.
So do you see yourself ever doing a wall again?
I do. I'm right now. Actually, I did a wall with my friend Simon Mentz. When I first started, about 3 years ago, I started designing portaledges again, mostly because I saw that for 20 years, really nothing had really been advanced since our 1997 design. You know, all the big companies were just making copies of the A5 design, and there weren't really any improvements since then. So, and I met a climber in Arapolis, and he was starting to get into big wall climbing. He said, "What, you know, why doesn't anybody make a nice lightweight portaledge anymore? All the portaledges sort of become bloated and over designed."
Look at my foot.
And so 3 years ago, I started thinking about portaledge design. And just over the last few years, I feel like we've come up with lots of cool innovations.
Yeah, and you were sharing one with me earlier. Maybe you can kind of walk us over into your shop and show us what you got.
All right, yeah, let's talk about portaledges. One of my favorite topics. Let me see if I can switch this over. So well, let me go through a little bit of history. So this company I'm working now is called D4. Hang on, we want you to show that. But first, I'll just give you a little tour of my shop. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through, and here's a milling machine I just acquired. It's a Bridgeport milling machine, kind of a dream, very rare here in Australia. And then I got all my tools. So one of the things, and I guess not everybody has video for this, but really what I figured out was that the old block corner design, right now I got on video, this is actually the titanium A5 portaledge that we took on Great Trango Tower, and still hanging up in the shop here and going strong. But one of the things I realized is, like, what you really want is not only strength, but rigidity in the ledge. And I discovered just through actually playing around with some architectural stuff that curved corners, curved tubing can actually create a more rigid ledge. So, and also just realized, like, one of the problems with the big companies that were making portaledges was they added this horrible design kludge called the spreader bar. And, you know, I realized, like, even back when they first started making them with spreader bars, I'm like, that, you don't need a spreader bar. All you need to do is redesign the frame to be rigid enough. So you need to increase the tube size just a little bit. So I actually wrote a whole treatise on that in Super Topo called Goodbye Spreader Bars, and basically went through all the engineering analysis of why just a difference in frame design eliminates the need for a spreader bar. But then, as I mentioned, also discovered this whole idea of a curved tube, which isn't really a new thing. I mean, people have been making cots and things with curved tubes, but it was really more the way it folded up, really, I would say, that was the breakthrough. Just creating a 6 or 8 piece frame that would fold up into a compact package that you could deploy quickly. So yeah, anyway, over the past 3 years, I've been playing around with lots of different designs. First, we made the full-size portaledge, which is now being made by Barry Ward at Durango Sewing Solutions. And I went to Durango and helped him. He's an amazing craftsman, and he used to work for me at A5. And he picked it up right away, and we worked on the patterns together. And that pretty much is probably the best ledge going today. And then we made a smaller version. I helped Run Out Customs get started about 10 years ago with my A5 design. And then he started making an Alpine double of this new D4 design. And then I started working on these smaller ledges, call them like sub full size ledges, and finding a big market for those actually in non-climbing things. I just shipped out a bunch to these rangers in South Africa and Zimbabwe who are trying to catch poachers, and they want these sub portable ledges because they have to go way out in the field and they need to be able to set something up quickly, and they're hiding in trees and watching to see where the poachers are coming and, you know, prosecuting them. And then also people who are protecting forests who want to, you know, are doing basically tree sitting. So, but now I'm working on a new design, which I think is going to be interesting. Hey, Remy, Remy, do you guys want to help show my new? Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a visual, but what we're looking at is a new concept for portaledges, which is basically instead of a ledge, which a traditional ledge is a rectangular shape that sits against the wall long ways, I guess. And what I'm working on now is a ledge that actually sits out from the wall. I call it the delta ledge. And I've tried this design a few times over the past 20 years, really, and never really got it right with the way the suspension and the frame integrated together. But this I think I've really nailed it on this design because it's very stable. You know, basically, let's see. Let's take this fly off. Yes. Yeah. So Remy, my girl Remy is actually here in the visual, on the video. She's going to just walk around the ledge, and you can stand up right on the edge. Yeah. Well, I meant right on the end, right? Yeah, jump in. So, yeah, get in right here. Yeah, get in. And you just kind of move around the ledge, and you can see it's going to be a very stable platform. And the other advantage is that both, instead of being a divider, yeah, that's good. It's basically more stability. Both people are sleeping head to head instead of like the normal traditional rectangular two-person portaledge, where you're sleeping head to toe. When it's head to toe, it's really hard to get a portaledge exactly flat. So when you're sleeping head to toe, somebody's generally going to be head down, really. With this ledge, since you're both head to head, you're basically like, you don't have to worry so much about getting it perfectly flat. You can. So anyway, this is
going to get access to the bag too. You said it's easier because it's right next to the ledge instead of being like far away.
Yeah, one of the things too is there's this whole new kind of idea that you always need your haul bag right next to it, where you can just reach from the portaledge. And so people are doing this horrible thing called the asymmetrical hang. I think it's coming out in the new textbook on big wall climbing. But asymmetrical hang on a traditional rectangular portaledge that is aligned with the wall is a horrible way. You know, it just puts extreme load on the frame. So this design, there's not that much distance, so you could really have your haul bag hanging from the same anchor and still be accessible to reach out. So that solves that problem too. Anyway, we call that the delta ledge, and it's very.
It looks quite comfy. Yeah. It looks great.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the future. Smaller, you know, smaller contact with the wall, so that you can get off, girl. Yeah, so, a lot more versatility for where you're going to be able to put it on the wall. You know, like you need a smaller flat area. So very excited about that design. I'm just working on the patterning now, and working on like exact dimensions of the tubes and things like that. Another thing we've done is we've come up with this, what's called the bullet joiner, a very lightweight joiner that works with our frames. It makes it just the frame just sort of snap together on its own.
Right. So you must have gotten the time run out on your non-compete.
Oh yeah, well, no, I was only 2 or 3 years non-compete, but yeah, that's all done, really.
Excellent. Well, I want to take another break for a sponsor, and this time the sponsor is me. This is my show. I'm one of the sponsors, and I just wanted to share a little bit about my first book, 50 Athletes Over 50. This has kind of launched me into this whole authoring, podcasting, all the stuff I've been speaking, all the things that I've been doing for the past 10 years or so. I wrote this book. I interviewed 50 athletes over the age of 50, trying to figure out, I wrote it when I was around 46. So I want to be one of these people, one of the athletes over 50 successfully staying active. And so I interviewed 50 athletes over the age of 50 to learn their lessons, learned a lot of lessons that I still have helped me to stay active and has helped me to stay stoked about doing the rostrum this year, which, you know, I'm training for right now. So if you want to be an athlete over 50 and you want some tips and tricks from 50 people who have done it successfully so far, you can find 50 Athletes Over 50 on Amazon.com. Or what I find is about half the people who buy this book from me, they give it as a gift to someone that they know who is an athlete over 50. And so you can find it on Amazon.com. So John, you've been at climbing for a long time. You took a bit of a hiatus. You're getting back into it now. Any insights around staying injury-free or getting back?
Well, it's interesting you say that, yeah, because for me, it's what I realized is like how quickly I would get out of shape as I got older, and so for me, I think my main tip would be to have some sort of barometer. I'll show you my barometer. In fact, I hope I can do it. Here, Rowan, can you hold that? So my barometer is like basically, I have a trapeze. I need to be able to do a few pull-ups and all these. If I, without being in shape, I can't do that. But now, I always make sure I can do that. And if I ever can't do that simple trapeze move, I know I have to start training.
Yeah, right. Just have the core strength and the arm strength to be able to.
Yeah. So having some sort of barometer just to be in basic shape is a good one. I don't overtrain. I mean, I have a hard time training. And as I say, I'm getting into climbing now because I want to keep up with my boy. In fact, here he is. He's out here.
Well, obviously, you're still in pretty good shape. Obviously,
this is Rowan.
Hey,
well, just look. It's really coming back just because I need to keep up with Rowan and my girl Remy, who are coming in online with climbing. So that's been a great motivation, of course. But yeah, I never was someone who trained a lot. I probably trained a bit when I was in Yosemite. I'd run just to keep in shape. But I always found it hard to train specifically for climbing. So really, I think for me to keep just in basic shape, it's like having some sort of barometer, know when I'm not in shape, and then then basically that kicks me into watching my diet and things like that. And just that's when it kind of motivates me that I need to do a little bit of training to do that. But yeah, I would love to climb Astroman and rostrum again myself. And I think for that, I would just need a few months in Yosemite, climbing routes. And I think that would be the kind of the main way I would be able to do that.
Well, if you're looking for a partner, just let me know. I'll start getting my sorry butt in shape.
Sounds good. Yeah.
What's that?
It sounds good. I think it would be the same way you did, when you did it originally. What did we do? We first climbed Middle Cathedral, and then we, climbed the East Buttress and the West Face of El Cap, and, built up to it. And I think I probably want to still go through that routine to get back into where I could fire off Astroman again.
And then some days of the cookie too. Some days of the cookie, right?
Exactly. Yeah, cookie, and it's all about long routes, really. Long route shape. Best way to train a long routes is to do long routes.
Yeah, right. One of the things I found when I wrote 50 Athletes Over 50 is one of the keys that most of those folks said to me. One of the key is not getting too far out of shape. They said, if you get too far out, it's just so hard to claw your way back.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I was really out of shape a few years back, when the kids were still young. I'm always really so impressed with climbers who have families and, are really good with their families and but also are staying in great shape. Because I found when my kids were young, I didn't really want to go on a week climbing trip or anything. I wanted to be around, and I really found it. I really got out of shape basically when they were first, when the kids were really young, and it's been hard actually to get back into just a modicum of shape, which I'm not in great shape now, but I can probably climb 5'10", and that's I want to get better, but I'd say it's time, really, isn't it? It's you need time, and so being able to do that within the schedule of other aspects of life, that's the secret. This is how do you do it?
It is hard if you've got some sort of work, you've got some sort of relationship life, you've got climbing, you've got other things that you're doing. It can get kind of challenging, and it's interesting. I think there are a number of people who are listening to this who can relate to having to take a break and just recognize that in the grand scheme of life, climbing at some point just takes a back seat, but that you can get back to it. I've met many people who have taken a decade off and then come back to rediscover it.
Exactly. That's me. Yeah. How are you doing it? What's your routine?
So I've never really taken a break except for when I had shoulder surgery and when I broke my leg in a freak fall a couple of years ago. Really, I just climb. I never get out of shape. I climb. I try to climb 2-3 days a week consistently, and
outdoors
and outdoors when the weather is good, and indoors when it's not. And they just opened a new gym 5 minutes from my house, so I couldn't be happier.
Great.
So 2 to 3 days climbing a week. What I find what's key for me is doing some of the other stuff. Like I stretch for 30 minutes every single day. I call it stretching and physical therapy. Like whatever the thing of the day that's bothering me, I focus on doing some physical therapy just to keep the mobility, and then some weightlifting, some calisthenic kind of stuff. Just because if all I do is climb, I just get out of whack.
Yeah. Yeah, well, 3 years ago, as I say, I designed a new Portaledge, and I felt like, well, I can't just design this Portaledge and not do anything. So there's a big wall in Australia's big wall is down at this place called Mount Buffalo, and my friend Simon, who's here visiting actually right now, he said, well, why don't we go do Aussie Madness together? And I was like, wow, okay, it's a 2-day wall, really. I mean, people do it in a day, but we're going to do it in a multi-day to test the Portaledge. And to do that, I actually went to one of those fitness gyms where they're like torture chambers where you just do kettlebells and burpees and all that stuff. I did that for about 6 weeks, and that probably was what kickstarted me from going from completely out of shape to basic shape. That I could actually do a 2-day wall again. And then, of course, climbing Simon was great because he's super strong. He's like an ultra marathon athlete, and so there was that buffer there, in terms of him being able to pick up any slack if I was slacking. But I was able to do it, and felt like I was an equal partner. So that was good. Yeah. So it's really, I think, having a goal is important, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like having a goal. In terms of like your goal now of Astroman.
Otherwise, I find that I just get into just a rut. Like it's just, okay, I'll go to Shelf Road. I'll climb 6 routes or 8 routes. And maybe I have a little tiny goal of red pointing a route, but having a big goal out there, like getting in shape for the Rosterman, now that's exciting. That makes it, I'll get up early. I'll do the workouts. I picked up running again just to drop some weight. I'm watching my diet. I'm cutting back on the wine, just those will make a difference in your lifestyle.
Yes. I think that's the other thing too, is as you get older, your metabolism diminishes. And so food just basically becomes weight, really. And that's the hard thing to do, I think, is to moderate your food intake. I think as a climber, weight is important. And I'm by no means optimal weight, but I think just cutting back on the extras. It's hard. I'm actually, as I mentioned, the last 3 years, I've been mostly focused on this hobby of Portaledges, and doing, a few months of teaching, relief teaching every, basically 3 or 4 months a year, doing relief teaching. But I'm going back to full-time teaching starting next week, actually. And I found that was hard because when full-time teaching, it's very all-consuming. And there's teachers out there who run to school and stay in shape, younger usually, but I find that it's a very all-consuming job really to be a good teacher. You're just thinking about like how you're going to design your next lesson all the time. And so this will be my next challenge, actually, to be able to go back to the full-time teaching, but also to make sure that I'm not, make sure that I'm actually maintaining my own fitness as well.
As you get a little bit older, you also want to treat yourself a little bit, right? Like my wife is a chef and we love food. And so it could be a challenge, right? I'm trying to drop 10 pounds, yet, she loves to cook and I love to eat. So it does take a little bit of dedication.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Not easy, but you can make it fun too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, John, we're at the top of the hour. I can't tell you, this has been so much fun getting a chance to hear about your humble beginnings, launching from small walls to big walls, and the stories throughout the years, how you took your engineering and applied it to create groundbreaking, game-changing technology for climbing and what climbing means to you now. So I really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you. I can't believe an hour's gone by. It's been really fun talking to you, Don, and appreciate it. And I'll be looking for your book too. That sounds like a great book.
Excellent.
Keep up with you.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm not kidding you. If I come to Australia, I'm gonna reach out to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, you always have a place to stay here.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Hey, thank you, Don.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.